Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And it may be the case that in the shadow cabinet at the moment they need a boxing referee to sort out the disputes that are going on between the different shadow cabinet members, as we read today in the Daily Mail. But I can assure honourable members and all members of this House that I believe that the Conservative Party are absolutely united in supporting the coalition government and the coalition ministers in what they are trying to achieve at the moment. And we do so against the backdrop of one of the most disastrous economic situations that this country has faced outside of a war. It's worth reminding ourselves just what it was that we looked at in 2010, when we came into office with a deficit of £160 billion and a debt that was rapidly rising to £1 trillion. And that was, of course, after years of overspending in good times as well as in bad by members opposite, of a cheap money supply, lax banking regulations from the former government. We had disastrous economic decisions such as that to sell the gold at a fraction of its real rate. And worst of all, most seriously, and this is what we deal with today, we had a welfare system that allowed people to get into a trap of welfare dependency, leaving them on the dole for many, many years, and at the same time filling the necessary gap in employment by allowing mass and uncontrolled immigration into this country, which allowed people to come in and completely undercut British workers. This was a disastrous legacy which this government, this coalition government, faced in 2010. And I'm very proud of the fact that instead of shirking away from the responsibilities, the ministers of this coalition government took very, very difficult economic decisions at the time. Of course we had to make cuts and reductions in public spending. Not to do so would have been grossly irresponsible and would have led to far greater levels of poverty in the longer term than we face at the moment. Because the reality is that we are a nation in debt. We're having to go off and borrow something like £10 billion every single month. And of course, we're also having to roll over existing debts that the government and previous governments, may I say, left us. And if, for any reason, the international money-lending organisations that give us that £10 billion a month ever decided that we weren't going to be in a position to either pay the interest or pay back the original sum, then they would simply stop lending it to us. And there would be no European bank and no IMF waiting there to bail us out for the sorts of money that we need. We would face an economic catastrophe on a far greater scale than the one we do at the moment. And that, of course, would lead to real levels of poverty. It could lead to even third world levels of poverty because we would simply run out of cash. That actually is the catastrophe that keeps me... I will give way in a moment. Let me just say this. That is the catastrophe that keeps me awake at night, far more so than the bogus claims about global warming when we see nothing, no rise in temperature for 16 years, or terrorism, which is a much more serious matter, but something which the security services have thus far been able to contain. I give way to the honourable member.
Would the honourable member not acknowledge the truth that the amount spent on welfare by the last Labour government decreased over time because we were effective in creating more jobs and getting people off welfare and into work? And was it not the case that the national debt at the time his party came to power was some 800 billion? It's now well over $1 trillion and rising.
The honourable gentleman is quite correct in that last point, and he makes a very important point. I'm not quite sure. I'd like to have found out where this point was going to go. Is he suggesting that we're not doing enough to pay down the national debt? Is he suggesting that we should cut further and faster? Because if so, and if we had the support of honourable members opposite, I believe that that is exactly what the government should be, could be doing, and indeed possibly should be doing. I look forward to that support for getting this deficit down.
I make it simply this, that the Labour government reduced the amount taxpayers had to spend on welfare because we were effective at investing in the economy, creating jobs and therefore getting people off welfare and into work.
I don't accept that point, but what I do accept is that when the last Labour government came into office in 1997, they spent the first couple of years paying down the national debt, which is exactly what they should have done. And from 2001 onwards, they started overspending by an average of about £30 billion a year. That is an absolute fact. I can tell honourable member that I have checked the figures on national debt very, very carefully. From about 2001 onwards, the Labour government decided to start overspending by approximately £30 billion a year. And they were overspending long before the financial crash happened in 2008, a crash which they incidentally had helped to cause. So, as I say, the ministers in this coalition government are absolutely right to be making cuts, and if members opposite feel that the deficit is still too high and that there should be further cuts made, I'm sure that we would all welcome support from members opposite. But there's another reason why I think the government are right to be doing this, and that is because the welfare system that we had, and which we're now reforming, trapped people into worklessness. I have many members of my family through marriage from Eastern Europe. Some of them have come into this country barely able to speak English, without qualifications that would be recognised over here, and have been able to get into work, first of all starting in low-paid jobs and then working their way up. I myself spent many years doing low-paid jobs. I'm not talking about holiday jobs or some sort of gap year. I never even went to university. I'm talking about many years of doing low-paid jobs, because I happen to believe that people should take any job that is available to them rather than simply waiting around for whatever they think they actually deserve, and using work to get better work. That is the way forward, and that is what the government are trying to encourage at the moment through the use of sanctions and through, frankly, making it difficult for people to just sit around watching the television all day. I'm not suggesting that that applies to everyone who's out of work or even a majority, but it certainly applies to a percentage of people who are out of work, and it's high time that it was stopped and tackled, and I'm glad that we've got people with the courage to actually do that. We get nothing from members opposite, just a massive contradictions. They say on the one hand that they want to be tough on welfare, tougher than the Tories, as the Shadow Work and Pensions Minister said, I think in October 2013, and then to a different audience they complain about every single cut to the welfare budget. They complain that the government are making cuts, and then they complain, as the honourable member did earlier on, that the deficit is too high. It's absolutely ludicrous. They say that they're against the bedroom tax, but they actually brought the bedroom tax in, albeit in the private sector. It really is such a massive contradiction that I cannot understand why anyone would feel that members opposite are fit to be put in charge of either welfare benefits or indeed in charge of the economy ever again. Of course, I'm delighted.
My friend had been in DWP questions this morning. You would have heard members opposite going on about work capability assessment. And of course, which government was it that introduced the work capability assessment? It was the previous Labour government.
I think the honourable member makes a very good point. And what we would all like to see, I believe, is some consistency, both on the economy and on what they're really planning for benefits from honourable members opposite. In the meantime, may I commend the front bench on both sides, both the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, who have been prepared to put aside their personal poll ratings, because frankly these are unpopular decisions, who've been prepared to do what is right for this country, not what is necessarily right for winning elections, what is right for this country, getting the deficit down and solving the long-term problem of worklessness. That is going to do far more to tackle poverty than anything that we will hear from the honourable members opposite tonight.